All right, so we need to go back and talk about how to deal with the 3x3 system again. So a little example here, I've already labeled them A, B, and C. First thing we need to do is decide whether we're going to get rid of R, S, or T. It really doesn't matter which way you choose to go. You could really get rid of any of them right away because all three sets are fairly simple to work with. However, hopefully you notice that T is probably going to be the easiest because I have three coefficients that are all the same. Since they're all the same, that means that I don't have to do any multiplying in this first step of adding two equations together, so it just makes life a little bit easier. So I have to decide which two equations I want to add. Since I have a positive and then I have two negative options, I'm going to add A and C, and I'm going to add B and C, because that would give me a positive and negative 3t in both situations. So A is R minus S minus 3t, and C is negative 5R minus 6S plus 3t equals 18. On the other side, I've got 2R minus S minus 3t is negative 7, and negative 5R minus 6S plus 3t equals 18. Now it works out really nicely because once we do our adding here, the t's will cancel out. We'll be left with negative 4R minus 7S is negative 19, and negative 3R minus 7S is 11. Now, at first, that might not look like it's going to work out really nicely. However, what you'll see is that the coefficients on S are the same, which means that, again, I'm not really going to have to do any crazy multiplying here. I can multiply one of my equations by negative 1 and end up with a positive 7S and a negative 7S, and then we can cancel again. So we did our first set of elimination, our second set of elimination. Now we're on to our third set. So I'm going to leave this equation alone, the 3R minus 7S, because it has less negatives in it than the other one. So leaving it alone means I'm dealing with less negatives overall. I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to multiply it by negative 1. So I end up with a positive 4R, a positive 7S, and a positive 19. Now when I add a negative 3 and a positive 4 give me just a single R. The S's cancel out, and I end up with 30. That seems... no. So that might seem a little crazy to you at first. Let's go back and take a look. So this is a case where I think my answer is wrong, because that seems fairly high. So whenever I come to a case like that, I always like to go back and first check and make sure that my adding was correct. And the first thing that I see here is that I have a positive 18 over here, and I misread over here and saw negative 18. So this should actually be 17. Now when I multiply by negative 1, that makes this a negative 17, which changes this to a negative 6. So that's how I deal with it whenever I come across a number that I think is just not quite right. I check through all my work and I make sure that all my adding looks good. I check and make sure I copied everything over correctly. And usually, if I'm going to make a mistake, that's where it is. So I've got R being negative 6. I'm going to take R and plug it into one of my two above equations. To me, this one looks easier, so that's where I'm going to plug it in. Negative 3 times negative 6 minus 7S equals 11. I get 18 minus 7S equals 11. Subtract the 18, I get negative 7S is negative 7, which means S has to be 1. That number seems pretty realistic to me. So now I'm going to take those two and plug them back into one of my three original equations. Again, it doesn't matter which one you choose. So I'm going to pick the top one, and I'm going to go negative 6 minus 1 minus 3t is negative 1. So negative 7 minus 3t is negative 1. Add that over, and I end up with negative 3t is 6, which means t is negative 2. Now, if you ever wanted to check your work and you're just not really sure about one of your answers, maybe you feel that negative 6 is a little high, if you plug all three numbers into two of the equations and check to make sure that it works out to the number it says it's going to over here, you'll know whether or not your answer works. The only reason I say not to pick just one is it's possible for 3 numbers to work in one and not another. So always test it in 2 equations. All right, heading on over to another one. So I'm going to show you how to go through this one in the next video in case you need a second example, and I will give you your answers to your homework problems at the end.